What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Gao, and thank you for joining us for the news. A Taiwanese man who was released from a scam ring in Myanmar has safely returned home. He is just one of the over 1,500 Taiwanese citizens who have made it out of trafficking and scam centers in the region over the last 3 years. But as John Van Trieste reports, the tactics that criminal groups are using to lure in victims are evolving.
The bruises and cuts on Xie Yupeng's arms are still visible. He's safe now, with Taiwanese immigration officers on either side. But things could well have turned out differently if the right people hadn't intervened on his behalf. Xie is one of what the UN estimates are hundreds of thousands of victims of Southeast Asia-based human traffickers. These criminal groups post fake ads promising high-paying jobs in countries like Thailand. Those who respond are kidnapped on arrival and trafficked to large detention centers, many forced to work scamming others back home. Conditions are said to be brutal.
把上衣全部脱掉，然后靠手靠在那个大广场上面，然后让太阳普晒。这期间都有可能会受到殴打、踢之类的都有可能。
Xie had been offered a job as a dance instructor in Thailand, but instead he was taken across the border to Myanmar, where he disappeared for 3 weeks. He and his father both say it was only the involvement of NGO negotiators that secured his release. In such cases, ransoms aren't unheard of too.
我当下那个时候只有我一个人被放出来，不是每一个老板都会愿意放。
我们这边的那联络官联络那个 NGO 他们真的蛮给力的，这种联系拉紧了，这机会就大了。
Scams like the one that trapped Xie have sprung up in a range of Southeast Asian countries in recent years, sometimes as an attempt by criminals to recoup their losses on failed gambling ventures in the region. Many of the criminals and their victims are Chinese. High-profile cases include Chinese actor Wang Xing, whose release from captivity last week made international headlines. But Taiwanese victims also make up a significant portion of those lured away with the promise of good jobs or easy money. The Foreign Ministry says it's helped rescue over 1,500 Taiwanese people from scam centers in the past 3 years alone. And anti-scam NGOs say the actual number of victims who've made it back to Taiwan may be even higher.
实际的求助数据，我们认为一定是有存在落差。这最主要还是因为像部分的受害者，他们可能基于恐惧，或者是说他们回台之后羞耻，不敢报警，然后或者是说甚至他们本身就不信任救援的这个动作。
NGOs say it can be hard to get support from the governments of the countries involved, especially one of the more favored countries these days, Myanmar, which is in the midst of a civil war.
泰国会说这些事情发生在缅甸，你找我干嘛？话缅甸军政府会说我管不了克伦邦啊，所以说他为什么愿意做？因为新闻闹大就愿意做啊。
Despite occasional crackdowns, the situation is murky and evolving. Some analysts see scammers broadening the range of victims and embracing new tools like deepfakes to con victims. Police at Taiwan's airports hold signs warning job seekers headed to Southeast Asia to beware. But scammers are well entrenched in the region, with the UN estimating they rake in billions of US dollars a year. The risk to Taiwanese people isn't going away. Chris Ma and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
A Taiwan court has upheld the death sentence of a man who brutally murdered a woman 4 years ago. It is the first ruling in favor of capital punishment since its use was restricted by Taiwan's constitutional court last year. Now, Reese Ayers is live with us in Taipei with more on this. Reese, given how seldom Taiwan actually implements the death penalty, why have judges decided that this case in particular deserves the harshest punishment?
Well, it's likely to do something with the sheer brutality of this murder and also the lack of remorse shown by the perpetrator. It's a decision that's likely going to be celebrated by those that support the death penalty in Taiwan, and polls show that over 80% of the Taiwanese public do support it. Now, this case will be celebrated particularly because it's the first time that a death sentence has been upheld in Taiwan since, as you mentioned, last year that the courts ruled in September that the death penalty was only partially constitutional and that it should only be used in the most extreme cases and that its usage should be narrowed. Now, back in late last year, a man who killed 8 people, 8 members of his own family in a fire, he actually had his death sentence commuted. That led some to question whether or not Taiwan's capital punishment laws were essentially defunct. The last time that Taiwan even actually put someone to death was in 2020. But this recent ruling shows that Taiwan is still willing to put people to death, that is still on the table. And in this instance, it's due to the premeditated and gruesome nature of that killing. Now, to briefly review, in October of 2020, a man from the southern city of Kaohsiung, he stalked, he kidnapped, raped, and killed a Malaysian exchange student who was walking to her university dormitory. Subsequent investigations found that he'd attempted a similar attack on another woman beforehand. Luckily, that woman was able to fight and escape. Now, skipping forwards to today, Taiwan's Supreme Court asked the local Kaohsiung court to review their sentencing, which they did, and they came to the same conclusion that this man should be put to death, showing that while it may be used sparingly, Taiwan does remain a country that's willing to put the worst criminals to death for the most heinous crimes.
Thank you for that explanation, Reese. That was Reese Ayers reporting live from Taipei. Impeached South Korean President Yoon Yeol is under arrest after an hours-long police standoff outside his presidential residence. Over 1,000 police and anti-corruption authorities surrounded the compound in Seoul before Yoon surrendered himself. Anti-corruption authorities had been trying for weeks to detain Yoon for questioning. He was being investigated over abuse of power and alleged insurrection concerning his December martial law decree. Now, Yoon says he agreed to questioning to prevent bloodshed as protesters and police clashed outside his residence.
이 경호 보안 구역을 소방 장비를 동원해서 침입해 들어오는 것을 보고 불미스러운 유혈 사태를 막기 위해서 일단 불법 수사이긴 하지만 공수처 출석에 응하기로 했습니다.
South Korea's Yonhap news agency says investigators are now questioning Yoon. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth faced tough questioning by opposition Democratic Party senators at his confirmation hearing on Tuesday.
Can you name the importance of at least one of the nations in the ASEAN, and what type of agreement we have with at least one of those nations? And how many nations are in ASEAN, by the way?
I couldn't tell you the exact amount of nations in that,
but
I know we have allies in South Korea and Japan and in AUKUS with Australia, and trying to work on submarines with them.
Mr. Hegseth, none of those countries are in ASEAN.
Across.
None of those 3 countries that you've mentioned are in ASEAN. I suggest you do a little homework before you prepare for these types of negotiations.
Hegseth is a political commentator on the Fox network, and he previously served as an officer in the Army National Guard, and he was deployed to Guantanamo Bay and to Iraq. At his confirmation hearing, Democratic senators grilled Hegseth about his inexperience in government and his extramarital affairs, sexual misconduct accusations, and alleged alcohol abuse. Now, Hegseth fired back at what he called a smear campaign. He said his combat experience and non-governmental background qualify him to serve as head of the U.S. Defense Department. The top U.S. market watchdog is suing billionaire Elon Musk in connection to his acquisition of Twitter, which is now called X. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, alleges that Musk failed to disclose large purchases of stock in the social media company, which let him significantly undervalue later stock purchases. Now, this is the SEC's 3rd lawsuit against Musk. The future of these suits is unclear, with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump set to appoint a new SEC head when he takes office. A Taiwan-made communications satellite has been launched into space from California aboard a SpaceX rocket. The satellite, called Paris T1A, was made by Taiwan's space agency. It's expected to operate in low Earth orbit for 1 year. The goal is to verify the satellite's design, which can then better inform future missions by Taiwan. This is Paris T-1A's second attempt to reach space. The first was on a Japanese rocket, the Kairos, last month, and that mission was aborted just minutes after liftoff. Taiwan's military is inviting companies to propose designs for a new series of uncrewed ships. This is part of efforts by the Navy to modernize its fleet to counter increasing Chinese aggression in the Taiwan Strait. Yeol reports.
Taiwan's Navy is looking for private sector help to modernize its fleet. On Tuesday, the military reported 24 Chinese fighter jets operating near the country, along with 6 naval ships. This daily pressure around Taiwan's maritime border is pushing its armed forces to explore new ways to boost its defense capabilities. The Navy is now looking to private companies to design and develop new uncrewed ships capable of laying and clearing sea mines. Lawmakers from the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, are also encouraging the use of new tech to boost Taiwan's defense.
因为沁附案造成我国海军取得扫雷猎雷的能量往后延，鼓励海军用新的科技，用无人舰艇来进行扫雷，也会持续监督在招标跟研制的过程，不容许有任何的弊端产生。
Taiwan's Navy uses a variety of old U.S. warships that have been upgraded and refurbished as Taiwan tries to develop its own shipbuilding industry. But much of its fleet is more than 30 years old, and there are concerns over how effective these ships would actually be in a conflict with China. Analysts at Taiwan's government-backed think tank, the INDSR, say fewer ships and a shift to uncrewed vessels could be a good first step to modernizing the Navy.
你用也许数量少一点的船，就能够执行更长时间、更大范围的这样子的任务。它可以自动化操作的话，可能就要解决，就是说，例如它船只本身自己的可能是定位的那个能力，跟对于周边这个海况觉察的这样子的能力。
But to truly modernize, observers say that Taiwan's Navy might need to change its strategy, shifting to weapons like sea mines that can disrupt an adversary and boost Taiwan's deterrence against Chinese ships.
Sea mines are really challenging for any Navy to deal with because you have to locate them, you have to clear them. If a ship hits one of them, it's blocking the path. And the question then becomes for Taiwan is how do you very quickly deliver those mines when needed?
The bidding process for the new uncrewed ships will conclude in just over a month. And for now, Taiwan's Navy awaits proposals from local companies to support its military modernization efforts. Fu Huahong and Yeol for TaiwanPlus.
Vet students at a university in central Taiwan are using artificial animals to learn how to treat real ones. Cadence Quaranta reports.
Intubating a fake dog, a way for these vet students to practice their skills without having to use real ones. The students practice performing CPR on the dog and bandaging up its leg. On an artificial cow with organs made to look real, they can practice helping it give birth to an artificial calf. They can even learn to take blood from an artificial fish.
因为平常如果是真的直接去碰到动物，其实会很紧张。然后我觉得有一个实际的可以让我先知道它的解剖位置，比起直接看书会来得更具体。这样。
Traditionally, vet students often practice on live animals, but questions have been raised for years about whether this is humane. Practicing on artificial animals reduces students' reliance on real animals to learn the ropes. It's being tried not just in Taiwan, but also in some other parts of the world.
我们都有这个动物保护的这个 issue 哈，那所以真的是没有办法去拿这个真正的活体啊来给学生做不断的练习。
But some say practicing on artificial animals also has its limitations because it's not the same as treating a real animal. But this university expects to add more types of artificial animals in the future, depending on what students need. Scott Huang and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Follow us on social media to get more of our news reports and updates in your feed. Finally, we take you to the streets of Paris for a vintage car gathering. I'm Eric Gao. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
For more stories from Peru and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.